Here's the math. A 32-ounce bottle of 3% hydrogen peroxide costs about $1 at any drugstore. Mixed correctly, that one bottle treats roughly 200 gallons of garden water, enough to carry a small backyard plot through an entire season of fungal pressure. For 22 years, I gardened next to an Amish farm, and I never once saw Daniel reach for a chemical fungicide. Not once. What he reached for instead surprised me the first time I watched him do it, because it sat in his pantry next to the baking soda. I'm going to show you exactly how to use it in 4 steps. The ratio, the timing, the plants that love it, and the 2 plants that absolutely do not. And at the very end, I'll share the one mistake that ruined my first 3 batches. That bottle Daniel reached for sat on Ruth's pantry shelf, 3rd row from the top between her box of baking soda and her jug of white vinegar. Brown bottle, white cap, dusty from sitting. 3% hydrogen peroxide from the drugstore, the same stuff most of us have under the bathroom sink for cleaning a cut. This was August 2003, the summer of the blight disaster. I'd already walked over with my root beer, already had the conversation about fighting the wrong war. A few days later, Daniel walked me into Ruth's pantry and pointed at 3 things on that shelf: baking soda, white vinegar, hydrogen peroxide. He told me those 3 handled almost every plant problem he'd ever had in 50 years of gardening. Not one of them cost more than $2. Most American gardeners get this wrong for 2 reasons. They assume the answer has to be expensive, so they walk past the drugstore aisle and pay $30 for a branded fungicide. Or they hear about peroxide, buy the wrong concentration, and burn their plants the first time they spray. Both mistakes are easy to avoid. 4 steps: the exact ratio, the timing, the plants that love it, and the 2 plants that absolutely do not. And at the end, the mistake that ruined my first 3 batches. Step 1, the ratio: 1 teaspoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide per 1 gallon of water. That's it. That's the whole formula. Mix it in your sprayer, shake it gently, and you're ready to walk out to the garden. Here's the math on why a single dollar bottle goes so far. A 32-ounce drugstore bottle holds roughly 192 teaspoons. 1 teaspoon per gallon means that one bottle treats about 188 gallons of water. Call it 200 to keep the numbers round. For a small backyard plot, that's a full season of weekly applications with change to spare. A properly mixed gallon of spray costs about half a cent. I'll say that again, half a cent per gallon. Now, I want to be straight with you about concentration, because this is where most folks ruin their plants before they ever get started. The brown bottle at the drugstore is 3%. That is the only concentration you want for foliar spray. If you walk into a beauty supply store, you can find 12% peroxide for hair bleaching. If you go online, you can find 35% food-grade peroxide. People buy those thinking stronger is better. Stronger is not better. Stronger will scorch your leaves white along the edges within an hour, and you'll think your plants caught a disease overnight. They didn't catch a disease. You burned them. 3%, drugstore, brown bottle, white cap, nothing else. Daniel keeps his teaspoon measure on a nail above the pantry shelf. I picked up that habit too, a dedicated metal teaspoon hanging next to my sprayer in the garden shed, so I never have to guess and never have to dig through a kitchen drawer with dirty hands. What failure looks like in this step: white scorching on leaf margins within a day or 2 of spraying. That means your concentration was wrong, either because you used a stronger bottle than 3% or because you got heavy on the teaspoon. A teaspoon is a teaspoon, not a heaping teaspoon. Level it off. Do this right, and you've already done the hardest part. A gallon of working solution ready to spray for less than a penny. Step 2, the timing. Spray early in the morning before the sun reaches the leaves, once a week during humid fungal pressure. Stop 14 days before harvesting any leafy crop. And this is the one most people miss. Use the mixed solution within 4 hours. I'll come back to that last one in a minute. Let me walk through the rest first. In my zone, 6B here in Lancaster County, fungal pressure really kicks in around the first week of July and runs hard through August. Humid mornings, warm nights, dew sitting on the leaves until 10 in the morning. That's the window. Once a week through that window. Outside of that window, you don't need to spray at all. There's no fungal pressure to push back against. Morning application matters more than people realize. Daniel walks his garden every morning with a cup of coffee, just observing. And his spraying happens during that same window between about 6 and 7:30, when the sun is up but hasn't crested the trees yet. The reason is straightforward. Peroxide reacts with ultraviolet light. If you spray at noon with the sun beating directly down on wet leaves, the UV catalyzes the reaction so hard and so fast that you'll burn the leaves yourself. The fungus gets a side helping of plant damage, and the gardener wonders why it didn't work. Pre-dawn or just after sunrise, cool leaves, light still slanting low through the trees, the smell of tomato leaves coming up out of the dew. That's the moment moment. The 14-day cutoff before harvest applies mostly to leafy crops, lettuce, spinach, kale, chard. Hydrogen peroxide breaks down into water and oxygen within hours of application, so there's no residue concern on a tomato or a pepper that you're harvesting weeks later. But on a head of kale, you're going to cut and eat raw the next day, give it a clean rinse, and a 14-day rest from spraying. Daniel's rule, belt and suspenders. Now the 4-hour rule. Once you dilute peroxide in water, it starts breaking down immediately. By 4 hours in, you've lost meaningful potency. By the next day, you got plain water in your sprayer. Mix only what you'll use that morning. Walk out, spray, come back, rinse the sprayer. Do this right, and within 7 to 10 days, you'll see visible reduction in powdery mildew on whatever you sprayed. Less white dust on the squash leaves, cleaner new growth pushing through. Step 3, the plants that love this treatment. Tomatoes are at the top of the list. Early blight, septoria leaf spot, the brown spots that start at the bottom of the plant and creep up. Or peroxide spray is one of the best non-chemical interventions I've ever used on tomato disease. I spray the lower foliage hard, get the undersides of the leaves where the spores actually live, and the upward progression slows down or stops within 2 weeks. Peppers benefit the same way, though pepper disease pressure in my climate is lighter than tomato pressure. Same ratio, same timing, same result. The whole squash family is where I see the most dramatic recovery. Zucchini, summer squash, cucumbers, winter squash, pumpkins. Powdery mildew hits these crops every August like clockwork in humid country. You wake up one morning, walk out with your coffee, and the lower leaves look like somebody dusted them with flour. 3 weekly sprayings of peroxide will not bring those whitened leaves back. Once they're coated, they're done, but it will stop the spread to the new growth coming up from the crown. I had a zucchini bed in 2019 that was completely overrun with powdery mildew by mid-July. I almost pulled the whole bed out. Started spraying instead every Sunday morning at 6 o'clock for 3 weeks straight. Daniel's broadfork was leaning in the corner of that bed the whole time where I'd left it after turning the soil that spring. By the third Sunday, the new leaves coming in at the top of the plants were clean and green. I harvested zucchini from that bed straight through to first frost. I'll never forget standing in that bed in late September pulling fruit off plants I'd been ready to compost 2 months earlier. Beans handle peroxide well, especially for rust. That orange spotting on the underside of leaves that shows up in damp years. Brassicas, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, kale, collards benefit when downy mildew shows up in cool, wet stretches. There's a bonus use that I learned from Daniel my second year, and I'll mention it here because it fits the same bottle. Soaking seeds in a 3% peroxide solution for 30 minutes before planting. Same drugstore strength, undiluted. Pour a little in a small bowl, drop your seeds in, set a timer for 30 minutes, then plant them wet. The peroxide oxygenates the seed coat and softens it just enough to wake the embryo up. I've seen my germination rates jump on older seed, especially squash and brassica seed that's 3 or 4 years old and starting to lose vigor. Same bottle, 2 uses, about $1 end to end. Step 4, the 2 plants that absolutely do not tolerate this spray, basil and lettuce. I want to be straight with you about why, because if you skip this step and just go spray everything green in your garden one morning, you're going to lose a crop. I know because I did exactly that in 2011, and I'll tell you about it in a minute. Basil leaves and lettuce leaves are anatomically different from tomato leaves or squash leaves. They're thinner. The waxy cuticle that sits on top of a tomato leaf, that protective coating that lets a peroxide spray sit on the surface and react with fungal spores without harming the leaf tissue underneath. Basil and lettuce don't have much of that. The peroxide goes through, it oxidizes the chlorophyll directly. On basil, that shows up as brown speckling across the leaf surface within 24 hours, and worse, the flavor of the leaf goes bitter and metallic. You can't cook with it. The whole plant is essentially ruined for kitchen use, even if it survives. On lettuce, you get brown scorching along the leaf edges and across the outer leaves of the head. A butter lettuce head that should have been creamy and tender turns into something with rust-colored edges that nobody wants to eat. The bitter taste pushes into those scorched edges too. Spring of 2011, I had a beautiful bed of butter lettuce coming in, 24 heads, about 3 weeks from harvest. That same morning, I was spraying my tomatoes for the first early blight spots of the season, and I figured, well, I'm out here with the sprayer anyway. I'll do a quick pass over the lettuce bed for whatever might be brewing. Took me about 90 seconds. By the next morning, every head had brown edges. By that evening, the centers were starting to brown too. I lost the whole bed, 24 heads of butter lettuce I'd been tending since March, gone in a day and a half. My wife walked walked out, looked at the bed, and asked me what I'd done. I told her. She didn't say anything mean. She didn't have to. That was the last time I sprayed anywhere near the basil or the lettuce. Now I keep a mental map of the garden when I'm spraying. Tomatoes, yes. Peppers, yes. Squash, yes. Beans, yes. Brassicas, yes. Basil and lettuce, walk around them. If they're in a bed with anything else I'm treating, I wait until I have a windless morning and I spray with the wand held low and angled away from those rows. Daniel told me once that knowing what not to do is half of gardening. He's right about that, like he's right about most things. Now, if what I'm walking you through here is making sense and you're starting to see how the Amish approach plant problems differently than the way most of us were taught, the peroxide spray is one tool inside a much bigger system. Fungal pressure on the leaves is really a symptom of soil that isn't doing its job yet. In chapter 4 of my book, The 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol, I walk through Daniel's composting method, the one where the pile never stops, and explain exactly how healthy soil cuts fungal pressure down at the root before peroxide is ever needed. It's $17 at backyardbillbooks.com. If you're watching on your TV, grab your phone now and point it at the QR code on screen. Take your time. I'll be right here. The link is also down in the description if you'd rather type it in later. All right, let's keep going. 3 things go wrong more than anything else when folks first try this. The first one I see is people walking into a hair salon supply store or ordering food-grade peroxide online, figuring stronger has to be better. 12% will burn foliage on contact. 35% food grade will do worse than that. It'll bleach the leaf right where it lands, even on a tomato plant that handles 3% without complaint. The oxidation rate at those concentrations overwhelms the leaf cuticle before the plant has any chance to deal with it. Stick to drugstore 3%. That's the brown bottle with the white cap, the dollar bottle, nothing else. The second mistake is spraying in midday sun. I covered this in the timing step, but it bears repeating because I still see people do it. UV light catalyzes the peroxide reaction right on the leaf surface, and you end up with white scorch patches that look exactly like the fungal damage you were trying to prevent. Spray before 8 in the morning or after 7 in the evening, not in between. If the sun is on the leaves, the wand stays in the shed. The third mistake is one I've made personally. Spraying flowering cucurbits during peak pollination hours kills pollen viability and drops your fruit set. One summer I sprayed my zucchini bed right after breakfast when the bees were already working the open blossoms, and I lost about a third of my fruit set that month. The flowers fell off the vine before they ever closed. Spray the leaves only, avoid the open flowers, and do it before the pollinators are active for the day. The whole point of this method is to work with the garden, not knock its legs out from under it. I told you at the start I'd share the one mistake that ruined my first 3 batches. Here it is. My first season trying this back in 2004, the year after Daniel walked me into Ruth's pantry, I mixed a full gallon of diluted spray every Sunday evening and stored the leftover in a sprayer out in my shed for the next week's application. By the following Sunday, I'd grab the sprayer, walk to the garden, and treat my plants. 3 weeks in a row, no change. The fungal pressure kept building. I thought the method didn't work. I almost drove to the farm store for a bottle of branded fungicide. Then I asked Daniel. He laughed just a little. He told me peroxide doesn't sit. Once it's diluted and exposed to light heat and the trace iron and copper in well water, it breaks back down into plain water within hours. My first 3 batches were essentially tap water by the time I sprayed them. I'd been treating my tomatoes with water and wondering why nothing was happening. Here's the fix. Mix only what you'll use in the next 4 hours. Mix it in a plastic sprayer, never metal. Metals catalyze the breakdown, and keep your concentrate bottle in its original brown packaging in a cool, dark cupboard. The brown bottle isn't decorative. It blocks the UV that breaks the peroxide down on the shelf. Hydrogen peroxide wants to become water and oxygen. Anything that helps it get there, but light, heat, metal, organic matter, drains its potency before it ever reaches the leaf. Before I let you go, I want to come back to something. Hydrogen peroxide handles the fungus after it shows up on the leaves. But a lot of that fungal pressure starts with insect damage or chewed leaves, punctured stems, the little entry wounds that fungal spores exploit to get inside the plant. In chapter 5 of the book, Physical Barriers That Actually Work, I walk through Daniel's row cover and netting protocols on the face of the upstream defense that keeps the leaf damage from happening in the first place. The 30-Day Amish Pest-Proof Garden Protocol is at backyardbillbooks.com. If you're on the big screen, go ahead and scan that QR code now. I'll wait while you grab your phone. No hurry. It's everything Daniel showed me over 35 years, organized into a 30-day protocol you can start this weekend. So that's the method. A dollar bottle of drugstore peroxide mixed right and timed right will carry a small backyard plot through an entire humid summer of fungal pressure for about half a cent a gallon. Daniel's been doing this kind of quiet substitution his whole life. A pantry chef shelf instead of a chemical aisle for nearly every problem most American gardeners try to spend their way out of. If you want to see another one of these, watch my video on Daniel's compost protocol next, the one where the pile never stops. Try the Peroxide spray on a single bed this season and drop a note in the comments to let me know how it goes. I'll see you in the next one.